The desert night was colder than it had any right to be. Wind curled down from the black hills and swept across the lonely prairie, carrying with it the bitter taste of dust and silence. Under that vast and merciless sky, a little girl trudged along the dirt path, her arms wrapped tightly around the bundle of her baby sister. The child's face was pale, cheeks hollowed by hunger, her small breaths shallow and uneven against her sister's chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, but the girl pressed on until a glow appeared in the distance, a lantern burning dim in the window of a weathered ranch house. She had heard whispers about the man who lived there, a figure most townsfolk spoke of with caution, even fear. Some said he was as hard as the land itself, a rancher who wanted nothing to do with the troubles of others. Still, with no one else left to turn to, she found her feet carrying her to his door. With trembling knuckles, she knocked. The silence that followed stretched like eternity. At last, the door creaked open, and the girl lifted her tear-streaked face, whispering words that pierced the quiet night. "Can we have milk?" Long before that night at the stranger's door, the two sisters had known a life as fragile and worn as the hem of their mother's dress. They lived in a cabin on the far edge of town, where the prairie grass met the desert's edge and coyotes sang beneath the moon. The boards of the house leaned tiredly, patched with whatever scraps their mother could salvage. Smoke rarely rose from the chimney, for wood was precious and winters were long. Their mother, a woman whose eyes carried both tenderness and fatigue, had been widowed early. Her husband, once a drifter-turned-ranch hand, had never returned from a cattle drive gone wrong. No one spoke of him after that, except in hushed tones of regret. She bore the burden alone, raising her girls with whatever work she could find, washing linens for saloon girls, mending clothes for miners, and selling bread baked in her tiny stove when she could afford flour. The town itself was no place of comfort. Dust blew through the streets, coating storefronts and saloon steps. Men with whiskey on their breath argued over poker games, while ranchers struggled against drought that cracked the earth and starved their cattle. It was a land that demanded more than it ever gave, a land where weakness was often left behind. Yet in the quiet moments, when her mother hummed lullabies and tucked them beneath a threadbare quilt, the girls almost believed they were safe. Almost. The sickness came as quietly as a shadow, creeping into their cabin with the first chill of autumn. At first, it was only a cough, soft, almost hidden, yet it lingered no matter how many herbs their mother boiled in a cracked pot over the fire. Soon the cough deepened, shaking her frame, leaving her bent and breathless as she pressed a hand against the wall for balance. But she never let the girls see her fear. When her strength failed, she smiled through cracked lips, tucking a strand of hair behind the older daughter's ear, whispering, "Be strong for your sister." At night, while the baby whimpered from hunger, the mother pushed her own portion of bread toward her children, insisting she wasn't hungry. Her eyes said otherwise. The days bled into nights, each colder than the last, until one morning, the older girl woke to silence. Her mother's body lay still upon the cot, her face pale as the frost that clung to the window pane. No tears came at first, only a numbness, as though the world itself had stopped breathing. The little girl, no more than 8, dug into the hard earth with trembling hands, fashioning a shallow grave beneath the cottonwood tree behind their home. She whispered a prayer she barely remembered hearing in church, clutching her baby sister to her chest. Alone, she laid her mother to rest, the final clump of dirt falling like a drumbeat against the wooden cross she had carved. After the burial, the cabin seemed to shrink, its silence pressing in like a weight too heavy for small shoulders to bear. Hunger gnawed at the girls until the older sister made the long walk into town, her baby sister bundled against her chest. She knocked on neighbors' doors, hope flickering each time, but hope was met with shutters closing. A woman shook her head, muttering that she could barely feed her own. A shopkeeper frowned, handing her nothing but pity. At the saloon, laughter drifted over cruel whispers. Orphans are nothing but mouths to feed. One man even spat into the dust, telling her to take her troubles elsewhere. Each rejection carved deeper into her heart. But the girl didn't cry. She held her sister tighter and kept walking, her small boots dragging through the dust of Main Street. It was then she remembered the rancher on the far edge of town, a man known for his silence, his grief, and his temper. Folks said he wanted no part in anyone's troubles. Some children even whispered he was cursed. But desperation dulls fear. That night, when the wind howled across the plains, the girl turned her steps toward his lonely ranch, the last sliver of hope trembling in her chest. The ranch stood like a dark sentinel at the edge of the prairie, its fences broken in places, its windows glowing faintly with the light of a single lantern. The little girl's steps slowed as she drew near, her heartbeat louder than the cicadas crying in the grass. She had heard the stories how the man inside had lost his wife and child years ago, how grief had hollowed him out and left him colder than the desert wind or still. Her sister stirred weakly in her arms, lips dry, eyes half closed. There was no turning back. She climbed the wooden steps, her small boots creaking against the boards. With a trembling fist, she rapped on the heavy door. At first, nothing. Then came the scrape of boots against the floorboards, the slow groan of hinges, and the door swung open. Framed in the lamplight stood the rancher, broad-shouldered, face shadowed beneath a weathered hat, eyes sharp and wary. He said nothing, only studied her with a gaze that could cut stone. The girl swallowed hard, lifted her chin, and whispered, "Can we have milk?" Silence followed. The rancher's jaw clenched, his hand tightening on the doorframe. The night itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. For a long, aching moment, the rancher didn't move. His face was unreadable, carved deep with lines of a man who had seen too much and lost more than he cared to speak of. The girl's voice, though small, seemed to echo in the emptiness of his house and the hollowness of his heart. Finally, with a grunt that sounded more like surrender than kindness, he stepped back and motioned her inside. The warmth of the lantern-lit room washed over her as he crossed to a cupboard and pulled down a tin pail of milk. He poured it into a cup and slid it toward her with rough, calloused hands. The little one stirred, lips parting eagerly as her sister guided the cup to her mouth. For the first time in days, the baby drank without crying. The rancher watched in silence, his arms crossed. His eyes betrayed a flicker of something, pain, maybe, or memory. Years ago, he too had held a small child in his arms, a child who never grew old enough to ask for milk. The ghosts of his past pressed in on him, but for reasons he couldn't explain. He fetched bread and a blanket. "You can stay tonight," he muttered, almost against his own will. And just like that, the first fragile thread of trust was spun. By morning, the news had already spread. In towns as small as this one, whispers traveled faster than stagecoaches, and the sight of two children at the rancher's side was too juicy a tale to keep quiet. By noon, women leaned over fences, muttering that he had no business sheltering beggars. Men at the blacksmith shop shook their heads, claiming he was a fool to take in mouths he couldn't afford to feed. The talk reached the saloon that evening, where smoke and whiskey fueled sharper tongues. The rancher pushed through the swinging doors, his hat low, his jaw set. The room hushed for only a moment before laughter cracked open. "Never thought I'd see the day," sneered a ranch hand from the corner, his boots kicked up on a chair. "The coldest man in Dakota, playing nursemaid to orphans. They'll drag you down." Another chimed in, "Best send them to the church and be done with it." The rancher's eyes narrowed. He set his glass on the bar with a slow, deliberate tap, then turned to face the room. "Those girls," he said, his voice low but steady, "are mine now. You got something to say about them. You're saying it to me." The silence that followed was heavy as gun smoke. A few men shifted in their seats, others dropped their eyes. No one dared speak again. In that moment, the orphan girls were no longer beggars, they were his family. The days that followed carried a different kind of silence across the ranch. Not the hollow quiet of loneliness, but the gentle hush of a home rediscovering its heartbeat. Where once only the creak of wind through broken fences filled the air, now came the soft laughter of children chasing each other across the yard, the sound of little boots pattering against wooden floors, and the unexpected warmth of a baby's giggle echoing through rooms long empty. The rancher, once a man carved from grief and solitude, found his hands busy with more than cattle and fences. He learned the rhythm of warming milk before sunrise, of mending dolls with the same patience he gave to bridals, of telling stories by the fire to small faces whose eyes glowed with trust. The ghosts of his past no longer haunted him as cruelly. Instead, they seemed to rest easier, knowing he had found a new reason to keep living. For the little girl, every night tucked into bed with a full stomach and her baby sister safe beside her was proof that she was no longer alone. Once rejected, she had found the thing she had dared hope for, a place, a protector, and at last, a family. And now, dear listener, I'll turn the question over to you. Imagine yourself in that rugged frontier, the night cold, the wind howling, and to starving little girls knocking at your door with nowhere else to go. Would you have risked your comfort, your reputation, maybe even your safety, to take them in? Or would fear and the harsh judgment of neighbors have made you turn them away, as so many others did? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every choice tells a story, and I'd love to know what yours would have been. The Wild West was a land that tested every soul who braved it. It was harsh, unforgiving, and often cruel, yet even in the dust and shadows, there were moments when light broke through, when one act of courage or kindness changed the course of a life. The story reminds us that true strength isn't found in a fast draw or a full pocket of gold, but in the choice to show compassion when the world least expects it. Kindness in the hardest times can change lives forever, and sometimes it even saves the giver as much as the one receiving. If this tale stirred something in your heart, I invite you to keep riding with us through more stories of the frontier tales of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more Wild West stories that will stay with you long after the dust settles.